I just didn't have time to bike race anymore. So I wanted to start running again. And literally within a month of me running, I broke my foot. Sure enough, I had like severe osteoporosis, and it's really hard to hear that at age 36. I went back to school and I just dove into nutrition, and I was like, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to, this is not okay. I'm going to fix it, and I'm going to learn how to teach other athletes that they don't have to get to the point that I got to.
Welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast. My name is Claire Shorenstein, and I'm a registered dietitian and running coach based in New York City. My goal for this podcast, aside from having fun, of course, is to demonstrate that there is no one-size-fits-all style of eating. Rather, there are many different pathways towards individualized health and sports performance. I explore this in my athlete nutrition profiles as well as in interviews with fellow dietitians on their areas of expertise. I am really excited about today's topic because it is a very important one for all active people, athletes of all levels. It's chronic underfueling, which leads to something called RED-S, or Relative Energy Deficiency in sport, which is, a fairly new term that it kind of replaced the whole female athlete triad that we used to hear about more often, to be more encompassing of the wider kind of array of things that can happen to the body, but also to include men, because we know that men experience this as well. It's not just women. And it's something that, I've touched upon in other episodes, whether, directly or indirectly, but it's an important topic that needs to be explored in its own show. So I am doing that today with the help of my special guest, who is a sports nutritionist out in Portland, Oregon, named Kristin Duyn. Really excited to have her on the show. She shares her own story of her own struggles with being an athlete at a fairly high level and underfueling in an unintentional way, because remember that, you may have the best of intentions of, eating enough, and you may have high energy needs and you're just not getting there. So it's not always an intentional eating disorder or disordered eating situation. And as I talk about with Kristin, sometimes it is a bit of a blurry thing, is it intentional or not? But she really struggled with this, and it was that struggle that led her to pursue nutrition and go back to school and, try to help other athletes from basically avoiding what she went through, because obviously it was a struggle and it ended in injuries and health issues and, missed opportunities. So we really, each of us as practitioners always want to help our athletes feel their best, fuel their best, perform their best, and be in their sport for as long as possible, right? So we really get into lots of good stuff, including things to look out for, what RED-S is. We get into kind of treating some of the things that happen, how we each individually work with our clients, but also practical tips. Obviously, not everyone is looking to work with a dietitian or a nutritionist. So, we kind of go into some things, some good take-home messages, things you can try at home, stuff like that. So do have a listen. I hope this is a very helpful episode, and I'd love to hear your feedback. So without further ado, please enjoy my interview with Kristin Duyn. Hey, Kristin, welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast. I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Claire.
Yeah, so today's topic is relative energy deficiency in sport, otherwise known as RED-S, and it's a really, really important topic, especially among us sports dietitians, that we are always speaking to clients about and speaking to our audiences about. So we're really going to deep dive into it today, and I'm excited to get into that with you. But before we dive into that topic, I'd love to hear a bit about your background.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Minnesota, and I started running track in 7th grade, and I ran all through college. I went to the University of Montana on scholarship, and I ran the first 2 years and then decided Montana is such an amazing place to do other things besides run. So, I've just been an athlete my entire life. I've played soccer, super active. Always, growing up, I was always really healthy. I never even really thought about food and working out and how much I needed to eat, which actually, looking back, I kind of wish I would have known or been taught at an earlier age the importance of proper nutrition, but it wasn't until I moved to Portland, Oregon in 2001 when I graduated, and that's when I started to get into the longer distance running. And I one day I was at the gym and I was on the treadmill and I'm just running along, and this woman next to me was like, "Wow, you're running fast. I would love to run with you. I'm training for a marathon." And so I was always open to meeting new people in a new town. So we started training, and it turns out she was actually trying to qualify for the Olympic trials. And I mean, the more we ran, the faster we got. But it was during that time when you'd open a Shape magazine or a fitness magazine, and it would be like low carb, cut carbs. It's the best way. And I didn't know any better. So that's what I did. And here I am, in the and I'm not blaming the magazines, but they also don't put that disclaimer in there of like, by the way, if you're running 80 to 90 miles a week, you might not want to try this. I mean, I just bought into it. She bought into it too. And, we're training very hard, 80, 90 miles a week. And I mean, we were getting fast. I can guarantee you both of us would have probably qualified for the trials. However, I think it was like 2 weeks before the marathon, I was surfing and I just tripped on a rock and just my ankle just snapped. And looking back, there's no reason that I should have broken my ankle that way. It was definitely my body's way of saying, okay, this is enough. I've had enough stress. You are not, I obviously wasn't fueling enough. I was probably at the lowest weight I've ever been. And that's actually when I lost my period. I had always had healthy cycles until then. I was at age 24 at that time. So I just thought, well, it has to do with running. But then after that, I did go and see a doctor about my cycles, and he just said, well, you don't have enough body fat, so we'll deal. I mean, it was not a big deal. My OB did not think that this was a big deal. Until I wanted to have kids. So I just kept running. I think I had 2 more stress fractures before I decided I wanted to have kids. And no one brought up the fact that I'm not getting my cycle. I may have bone issues. And so then when I did go to, I tried to get pregnant, and of course I could not. I was suffering from hypothalamic amenorrhea. And their answer to that was, we've got drugs for that. We can get you pregnant. Don't worry. And I loved to run. And so I decided, okay, well, I guess this is what I have to do. And I had, 2 beautiful babies that way. But I never fixed the problem. I never fixed the underlying issue. And, I did get my cycle back a little bit after my second child was born, but then I started training again. And I think just the pregnancies and everything, I think that was the final straw that really zapped my body from the nutrients that that it needed to support my training. I was breastfeeding and training, and I mean, it's wonderful what pregnancy does to the female body. I was getting fast. It's just, there's something after pregnancy where you feel amazing, but I wasn't fueling enough. I mean, there was no info out there about how much you need to take in while you're breastfeeding and training. So I was actually breastfeeding when I ran and qualified for the trials. I ran a half marathon and qualified. And then I stopped breastfeeding, and when I wanted to run a full marathon before I actually went down and ran the trials again. And so I started training for another marathon, and then I broke my foot again. And that's just like, there's something going on. There's something going on. And I met with I probably met with 3 or 4 dietitians, and everyone kind of treated me differently, but no one really looked at me as an individual. No one looked at my family history. No one looked at, my history, my weight history, all that stuff. They just threw things at me. Or they accused me of having an eating disorder, which, I was eating and I just wasn't eating enough, but I didn't know how to eat. I didn't know that I needed to eat that much more for those heavy training days. And so that's when I decided I just hung up the running shoes. I couldn't handle the fractures, and I tried to get help. I started, doing some triathlon and bike racing, and I actually just toned down the exercise and, things came back. But then in 2014, I went through a divorce, and I kind of went down that like over exercise, under eat cycle again, and that's where I lost my period again. So yeah, and then I did the worst thing is I stopped running and bike race, which was great for my mental being, but it does nothing for your bones. And so when I decided I wanted to go back to school to get my master's in nutrition, I just didn't have time to bike race anymore. So I wanted to start running again. And literally within a month of me running, I broke my foot. And that's when I went to the doctor and I said, okay, this has got to stop. Something's wrong. And she's like, well, maybe we should get a DEXA scan. And sure enough, I mean, I had like almost like severe osteoporosis, and it's really hard to hear that at age, 36. So I went back to school and I just dove into nutrition, and I was like, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to, this is not okay. I'm going to fix it, and I'm going to learn how to teach other athletes that they don't have to get to the point that I got to. I want to help them. I want to figure out how to help people on an individual level where we're actually going to fix the problem instead of just throwing things at them and trying to mask it.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, and I don't think I realized your full story. And well, actually, I guess you hadn't shared it fully with me. But first of all, thank you for sharing all of that. And it's really lots of follow-up questions on all of that. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely a tough journey. And it's so crazy to me too that, and maybe this is just in some ways, I mean, not all doctors are like this, of course, but I do think it's not uncommon for doctors just to throw band-aids at things. Like you said, like you were, struggling to conceive, and here, take this pill, rather than, although I mean, I have heard of other people also go to the other extreme of, well, stop running. You're not allowed to run. You have to gain weight. But like for certain people, it's like, well, you don't need to stop running necessarily. Like that's not necessarily, like they kind of go in the other extreme too. So it's one of those tricky things. And I can't really relate to that myself, but I certainly have other friends who have gone through this, and yeah, it's a tricky one for sure. But it is kind of interesting that no one really thought to ask, and especially if you worked with several dietitians, like that's kind of surprising that, I mean, and I mean, maybe this was, well, it wasn't so long ago. It doesn't sound like, I don't know how old
I mean, this was before the whole,
when was all this?
I feel like Red S, to a very positive point, has become more on the forefront. Whereas back then, Red S no one knew what relative energy deficiency in sport was. I mean, it wasn't a concept. It was the female athlete triad.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of doctors knew about it, or, and so no one, I mean, I don't want to point fingers, because yes, I did. I probably, my fault, wasn't fueling my body, and probably knew in the back of my head. However, no doctor ever mentioned you could suffer from a bone injury, Kristin, if you don't get your period back or anything like that. I think that would have made it a little bit more urgent for me to actually fix it, instead of being like, oh, okay, well, maybe I do just need a Band-Aid and eat a few more yogurts a day or something.
No, I think it's definitely a tricky area. And I mean, but like, for instance, like I'm surprised even that you didn't get like a DEXA scan earlier than you did, for instance, or that the dietitians, didn't, like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you went to a sports dietitian specifically, but But yeah, it's just all these things that, yeah, I mean, it's not that we're pointing fingers at anybody, but I guess it is something that can be somewhat easily kind of brushed past, or,
Yeah.
you can try different things. But, I mean, you had two kids, which is great. That's not everyone, is able to do that when they're struggling, and especially when you don't really get your period back in the natural way. So there is all that, and the fact that you were able to run and do all that. But I mean, it just led you to so much suffering and struggle, which we don't want. We don't want for our athletes to experience that.
No.
Can you just give me a little background on your educational background in the nutrition space?
Yeah. So I chose to go in a different route. I wanted to because I just wanted a little bit more. I wanted to take a really individualized approach, and I researched a ton of schools, dietetic programs.
Mm.
I chose to do this route at the Naturopathic School of Medicine here in Portland, Oregon. And, the reason I chose it is it's really heavy in biochemistry, really learning, the systems of the body. I mean, it was a fantastic education. The one part where I didn't, it wasn't sports nutrition focused. So that was on me to actually go and attend a bunch of seminars and kind of do my own, learning that way about the sports nutrition. But the basis of nutrition, it was a fantastic school to go to. It took me 3 years to get through the program with all the chemistry and so, I feel like I have a wealth of knowledge, and I was also able to take what I learned through school, apply it to myself. And I had a DEXA scan last year, so in 2020, and I have normal bone density now. So
That's great.
Yeah. So I always encourage athletes, it's never too late. It's never too late. I mean, obviously, the earlier that we address this, the better. But it's never too late to fix it.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I typically have registered dietitians on, but obviously there's so many people in the nutrition space that are doing all kinds of interesting stuff. So it's awesome to have you on the show. Yeah, so let's get into today's topic now in a little bit more depth and in a way that my listeners can learn from and hopefully apply to their own experiences to help obviously prevent going through all of this struggle or fix some of the issues that may be going on. But hopefully we can do more preventative work here than fixing. But as you and I both know, there's just a lot of struggle out there, unfortunately, especially in the sporting world. And, when you were speaking about, for instance, dietitians saying, oh, you have an eating disorder, I think sometimes that line of intentional versus unintentional can be blurred. Sometimes it's very clear, but sometimes it can be very blurry.
Yeah.
And the athlete doesn't always realize, like, maybe they have some belief about looking a certain way or eating a certain way for performance or whatever, and thinking that they are eating enough, but truly eating in a more restrictive way.
Yeah.
So again, it's just a very gray area that can be really tricky to work in, but it's a very, very important one to work in, obviously, as you know. So RED-S, again, relative energy deficiency in sport. For my listeners who may not be familiar with it, can you just share more generally what it is, red flags, symptoms, who's at risk, all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, so basically, RED-S occurs when you're in a state of low energy availability. So basically, that's just when your energy intake from food is not sufficient enough to cover the energy requirements for your basic life processes, as well as the energy demand from your training. And I view every individual as different of how long they need to be in a low energy availability state to actually suffer some of the consequences of red S. So that's why it's always good to take a, individual look at each person, because some people, can go a long time with underfueling without suffering any of the consequences. And some people notice it right away.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there are lots of different things that, we can look out for, and maybe you can describe kind of what the spectrum is, or the progression a little bit.
Yeah.
Like how would we, obviously we never, as non-medical doctors, we never diagnose things, but how would someone be diagnosed or characterized as having red S, versus like, kind of on the progression towards having it? Is that something you can speak to a little bit?
Yeah, it's hard because the initial stress of low energy availability actually causes an upregulation in the HPA axis, which is your fight or flight response. And so you actually get an increase in cortisol. And so sometimes you actually feel like you have more energy and your training is going almost better. But then those chronic elevations in cortisol, obviously have negative effects where, it'll alter your immune system, it'll suppress your digestive system, your reproductive system, and it can even like decrease your neuromuscular performance. So, it can cause alterations in the thyroid function, changes in appetite, decrease in the IGF-1. So there's a lot of things that happen, but I think red flags to look out for are performance consequences. Those are the easiest to notice. Injuries is probably the number one, whether it's soft tissue or bone, because your body just doesn't have the energy to recover from your workouts. So I think that's probably the number one thing that, when my clients come to me, they've usually suffered a few injuries. You have because after that uptick, you kind of get, then you start to feel tired and you have a decreased training capacity. Your responses to your workouts, you're not getting any response to your workouts. So you're doing the speed work, but you're not getting faster because your body's not recovering. Sometimes, I know in like bike racers, they can notice like decreased coordination, muscle strength. So, recovery. And then also a lot of times, athletes are irritable with their, teammates or coaches, have problems sleeping. So
there are far-reaching effects of all of chronic undereating.
So many. It's hard to go through them all.
There's so many things, and it's really, again, important to note that this can be kind of a gradual or a sudden progression, and also it can be intentional or unintentional. And I just pulled up, actually, I realized, I'm like, wait a minute, I have like this great little summary of warning signs from a presentation I did not long ago. I was like, I'm just going to read them all here as well to just summarize. And again, just for the sake of my listeners, just kind of, hammer it in of things to watch out for that may or may not be a part of all of this. So and it's just summing up what you already said: frequent stress fractures or other kinds of injuries, disturbance or complete loss of your menstrual cycle, otherwise known as amenorrhea, impaired judgment and or decreased concentration, decreased performance or quality of training. So maybe you're not recovering as well, you feel constantly fatigued, as you said, you're not kind of adapting to the physical stress of training, or all the good stuff of training, any kind of disordered eating patterns, and that in itself is like a whole can of worms of what that can look like. Extreme weight loss or frequent dehydration, low quality sleep, mood changes, heightened anxiety, feeling cold even on warmer days, constipation is any kind of, as you said, GI disturbances, low ferritin, which is iron stores, or other measures of iron status. So those are just, a bunch of things to look out for, which, it's a big old long list, but, chronic underfueling is a very serious thing. And it's something that we always want to try to prevent when, you have high, especially when you have increased energy needs.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Another
Cool.
thing I wanted to add is that,
Yeah.
a lot of my clients that are underfueling do suffer from a lot of GI issues. So delayed gastric emptying, constipation, or, some of them go the other way. It's just, that's a huge red flag as well.
Yeah. And can I just say one thing though? Like, I mean, right now, I mean, you're a mom too. You get it. COVID time's really hard. Like,
Yeah.
I am freaking exhausted right now. Like, I have no appetite. Like my kid has been waking me up like 1,000 times every night. Like, can I just say there's some differential diagnoses here? Obviously, like pandemic life and all the other things going on. And this is where like it just becomes so tricky. And I remember like I'll be like joking around with my husband, like not about Red S, but just generally like because we all got COVID in January, and I'm just like, well, okay, so this could be lingering COVID, or I don't know, I'm just an exhausted parent who got woken up 1,000 times, every single day. So it's like sometimes all of this, like the fatigue or the lack of appetite, or you're feeling like low grade nausea, or like your GI system's all messed up. I mean, the problem is there's so many causes of things, right?
Yeah.
Like it's so complicated, like the body, the mind. I mean, there's just so much going on. So here, of course, we are talking about Red S. These are the things to look out for. But you have to look, as you said, at the whole person, at the whole history, at everything going on. Like if you are running like, 100 miles right now, and objectively looking at the amount of food going in is like clearly not enough, and you're feeling like crap, like, yeah, that's probably linked, but if you're really dialing everything in and you have other things, like you're super stressed out or all these other things going on, like obviously you have to take that into account. That was a total sidebar, but I just wanted to mention it because I can relate.
I always tell my clients too, like, because some, are like, well, I'm not running that much, but stress is stress. Your body doesn't know the difference between exercise stress or, let's say you have a deadline with your job and you're super stressed, that's stress on your body. And so you need, your body needs fuel in order to counteract the stress. And so, it's hard. It's hard to know. And that's what, you and I are here for, is to really take a look at, well, what is your training? What's your life stressors? What's going on? Let's look at everything. What are you currently eating? Let's talk about your current diet, and then we'll see, how we can fix this.
Exactly. And everybody reacts differently to stress too. And now is such a time where there is a lot of stress and there is a lot of mental health challenges, and or there are a lot of mental health challenges. So, it's some people might be reaching for more food and gaining weight, and other people might be struggling to eat, or some people are more active, some are less active. It's everyone's kind of dealing with things differently. So, we always want to, as you said, really individualize all that. Okay, let's chat now about how active people, and again, when I say active, like, this could be the occasional recreational athlete who is trying to, like, for some reason, only intake like 1,200 calories because of MyFitnessPal or whatever it may be. I don't know. It could be someone like that. It can be an elite level athlete. It can be anywhere in between. Anyone who's active, who I call an athlete, how they can prevent Red S from happening, or even some of these warning signs, because obviously we don't want people experiencing those not fun consequences of underfueling. There are serious health consequences, obviously, and you yourself experience some, these injuries and other repercussions of the chronic underfueling / overtraining situation. Or maybe you weren't overtraining, but for the amount you were taking in, it was too much for your body, clearly. But I think like on a basic level, a lot of athletes understand. They understand that you need enough energy, enough food to fuel what you are doing, right? But I think they're still confused as to whether or not they're eating enough, and obviously based on what they're training for and what's going on, their training volumes change. Or if they're a more beginner, recreational athlete, like they're just getting into all this. And so again, as we say, like this the underfueling can be both intentional through disordered eating or even a full-on eating disorder, or it can be very unintentional. Someone really can have the best of intentions with trying to perform well and do their best, but they're just not cutting it, especially for people who are, exercising at such high volumes and have high energy needs. So the other thing to keep in mind here too, which is another challenge, of course, is appetite is not always reliable, because like we can ask as practitioners, like, well, are you hungry? Are you eating until you're comfortably full? Like, are you eating when you're hungry? And like, obviously eating in a more intuitive way, it's much more complicated than that. It's not just about eating when hungry and stopping when full, but also appetite is not always reliable. There are other considerations. For example, if you do have an eating disorder or disordered eating history where you might be more disconnected from those cues, or maybe you have a super busy schedule and you're super distracted, or you're skipping meals and snacks for other reasons, or you're a busy parent and you're prioritizing your family over yourself. I mean, there's just so many reasons why you might be detached, or maybe you just did a huge workout and you're struggling because you're not hungry. So really what I'm getting at is, and what I'd like for both of us to kind of discuss here, is what practical advice we can give to listeners, who really want to make sure they're eating enough, but they don't want to count calories or macros. Because I know for myself, like, I don't want people, like, maybe as just like a very beginning exercise, we can do some basic, like, obviously teaching and education, and like just generally, like, this is what a quote unquote serving of carbohydrates is, and this is how many throughout the day, or whatever it is, but really we don't want people just sitting around obsessively counting things. It's not practical. It can lead to more disordered eating. And we want, it's that trickiness of like, how do we make sure they're eating enough without counting, but also like balancing listening to our body with knowing we sometimes need more than it's telling us to take in. So I would love to hear how you approach this with your clients. I can speak to this as well, but would love to hear from you first.
Yeah. So what I notice is, I work with a lot of triathletes and runners, especially, and as we're all, a lot of us, I'm just generalizing here, but creatures of habit. So we like routine. And a lot of times what I notice is my clients are eating the same things every day, or the same amount, because it's easy. They have their set routine, and they're not taking into consideration what their workout was. And with running, it's hard because it does suppress your appetite, especially after a hard workout. And so they don't necessarily feel more hungrier after a hard session or a long session. And so they just fuel their body like they did yesterday on an easy day. And so how I deal with this is I don't talk to my clients about like, you need to hit X amount of protein and calories, because that's just overwhelming and it's not healthy, especially if someone does suffer from some sort of eating issues. So what I do is behind the scenes, I take a detailed diet diary from them, as well as their exercise and their health history. And I talk to them about what their training schedule is. And when I first start working with a client, I figure out what their training schedule is. And then I go in and behind the scenes, I figure out what they need to eat, both macro and micronutrients, to support that day of training. And then I give them a meal plan that gives them sample days of like, here's a rest day. This is how you can meet your calorie needs and macro and micronutrient needs on a rest day. And it just gives them, it includes some recipes. It's great, but it just shows them what they need to do on a rest day. But then the next day, maybe a, hour and a half workout day. And so then I show them, this is a day of eating on this day. So then they get it's a visual for them of, okay, this is what my eating needs to look like today, because this is what my workout is. And it's just a way of just showing clients without making them track anything.
Okay, got it. So it's kind of like sample meal schedule or meal plans is what it is essentially, and with some flexibility built in for what they're hungry for, what they're able to do.
Yeah, so it's not just like, this is what you need to eat on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Sure.
I label the days of, speed work day, or 2 session day. so then they can just take a look at that day. And some clients like can take that one meal plan and roll with it. Some want more, they want a little bit more guidance with, maybe every other week. And I found that to be pretty successful. So.
Okay. And do you so you're calculating calories out using like equations? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I use my chronometer and I go in there and it's more than just calories. I mean, definitely calories. I'm making sure that they're, I find out how much they're burning in each session and, making sure that they have enough energy for that day, based on their basal metabolic rate plus, energy expenditure. So,
Okay.
yeah. But then I also, and it depends on the client. Like if this client is suffering from an injury, then I make sure that in that meal plan, those micronutrients are in there that help them. I'm making sure they're getting a lot of vitamin C and a lot of protein. And, that's the one where I see a lot of clients falling short is protein. So, I just make sure that this meal plan matches their protein needs. So they see like, oh wait, I need to eat protein with every meal. And here's how I can do it. And it's tailored towards their tastes as well. So I'm not going to put, I'm not going to put meat on there if they're a vegetarian or
Sure. Yeah. I take a slightly different approach. I tend to, so I don't really do meal plans or anything like that, but I mean, I will do a sample day if someone wants that. But I'm trying to, like, obviously I'm looking at very detailed food logs as well and getting all the histories and all that kind of stuff and looking at their training and whatnot, and focusing on like a lot of the qualitative stuff. So I'm really asking for a lot of feedback and how did workouts feel and all that kind of stuff. I am calculating out their protein goals as a range and their carbohydrate goals also as a range based on their training volume, what they're up to, and kind of teach them, like we're not like tracking necessarily, but I definitely educate on, how can we get, just for example, 3 quote unquote servings of a carbohydrate? What does that look like? And how can you build out like, and just educating them on what balanced meals and snacks look like, and kind of teaching them how to roughly reach that protein goal within a day, what that might look like in a food. If someone really doesn't understand what like a serving of something looks like, and when I say the word serving, that is definitely not saying like that's the amount you have or whatever. It's just a unit. It's called a unit, a unit of something. And if they really don't have a sense of what that looks like, then I will have them measure it out just to get a visual. But I never want them measuring things. I want them to be ballparking it, and just again, just using visuals to kind of like generally, and then of course like playing into like, what do you actually want to eat versus feel you should, and what tastes good, and what are you craving, and let's never be restrictive about any of this, but kind of paying it, but then kind of balancing against like more objectively, well, okay, I do need to make sure that I get some protein in, and I do need to make sure I get some carbohydrate, and the timing of this and that is important in these instances, and kind of teaching them about those things. And then of course, speaking to certain micronutrient goals and looking at lab values and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think there are lots of different ways of approaching it. Back, pre-COVID, back when I was freelancing at a different office, we had a machine to test resting metabolic rate, and because I'm always very cautious about, like, I never want to give calorie ranges either, but even like in my own calculations for myself, I mean, you can always ballpark it, but unless you have that kind of test and that, that accurate measurement of someone where they're at that moment, it's just like so hard to know where they're at. And I always discourage people, like tools like MyFitnessPal and all that. Like if anyone ever wants to use it, I say, okay, the only way you can use that is if you completely ignore whatever stupid calorie goal they give you, and you only use it to get a sense of what you're taking in, just to kind of, just for the sake of our discussion. But really, I'd rather you not even go there. Like, I do not want tracking things. I want more of like a qualitative journal, like a descriptive journal where you can note, like, if you had GI symptoms, or you can know your energy levels, or your sleep patterns, or, maybe you had some sort of struggles on the emotional side of things with regards to eating or eating disorder stuff or whatever. So I think all those things are really important to look at. But yeah, there are lots of ways to approach all this, and people want different styles. I think a lot of people, like I certainly have turned away clients who really want to just be told what to do. And I'm like, I don't really do that. I'm like, you got to work with me, and I'm not just going to hand over something just being like, great, you do this. I mean, it sounds like you do this, similar thing where it's like, it is obviously a lot of learning and
100%. It's small goals. I mean, it's not like I give them the meal plan and I'm like, you have to follow this. It's like,
of course.
It's just the guidance of like, this is what a day based on what you like to eat and what we can add into your diet to fuel your day properly. Because some clients just need to see that. And most importantly, I usually start with, I just work in baby steps. So, it's not like I give them the meal plan and say, do this, because it's overwhelming. So usually I start with like, okay, do you see on the meal plan that, because I base it off the timing of their workouts as well. And I say, do you see what number one focus for this week or for next 2 weeks is, this is a sample of what you need to eat before these workouts. And do you notice that the longer the workouts, the more carbohydrates you need to take in prior. And, and so that's step one, is because a lot of runners especially aren't eating before their runs. And so, and that itself can set you off on a negative, in a deficit. You're starting your day in a caloric deficit. So, that's usually, we go in small steps, but I like to be able to show them, or if they don't want to see a full meal plan, I just give them a, sample, like, okay, on a hour-long run, you need X amount of carbohydrates, and this is here are 3 ways you can get it based on what we talked about, the foods you like. And so that's it's all about small steps. The last thing I want to do is overwhelm clients, especially when it comes to this.
Of course. And so let's take it now. Like, we both just spent some time talking about how we work with people, but now for my listeners who are not working with a dietitian, I would say that's the bulk of the people who are listening to this. I want to maybe give them some advice that they can take home for themselves and maybe evaluate their own diets or what they can do. Just kind of figuring this all out. Like if someone were to listen to this and be like, well, how do I know if I'm eating enough? So obviously you're going to take a step back and ask yourself, well, first of all, am I experiencing any of the warning signs that Claire listed or Kristin talked about? That's obviously one thing you're going to think about, and kind of paying attention to, okay, what are some other causes of those things? You're going to look at, obviously your training volume and kind of just, I think this is one where maybe I just assume people realize, like, if you're running 50 miles a week, like, chances are, like, you're not, if you think you're only be eating 1,500 calories, like, that's not going to be enough. It's like, there's some kind of things that you and I would say, well, that's obvious. That might not be obvious to someone else. And particularly, and we're going to hold off on talking about this, but particularly when there's weight loss goals involved. So that's a whole topic we'll talk about coming up. Don't worry, listeners. But when it's the weight issue, that's always another wrench into things. But yeah, maybe we can kind of talk a little bit about, or like dealing with appetite. Like, if someone feels, well, I must be eating enough because I'm eating when I'm hungry and I'm stopping when I'm full. Like, what are maybe you have some insights, and I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff right now and trying to think about how we can package some practical advice for listeners on who may be kind of questioning, again, whether or not they're eating enough or not. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, things that, they're not getting sample meal plans from you. They're not working with me. People, you know what I mean?
One thing I tend to tell people is pay attention to your sleep. If you're having a hard time sleeping at night and you're training if you're running 40, 50, 60 miles a week, yet you're having a hard time sleeping at night, that may be a sign that your body's not satisfied. That's a huge, that's a red flag. that I tell clients to look for is, or if they're waking up in the middle of the night hungry, because that shouldn't happen if your body is feeling satiated from the day before. So that's a sign, and then just try to just fuel your training and be conscious about, even though your appetite may be suppressed, kind of have an idea of how much you need to eat on these heavy training days. And then, on rest days, maybe you can focus a little bit more on higher protein foods and, complex carbohydrates. So, yeah, how about you? What advice do you have?
Yeah. Well, a few things. I think that like hunger, I mean, when it comes to hunger and fullness and all that, I mean, obviously those are really, really helpful signals. And when they are like I've had people like, why am I so hungry on a rest day? Or like feel the need, not like, they're like, well, I can't eat all of these things because I'm not working out today. Well, okay, if you just did like a 20-mile run yesterday, or even if you didn't, you did like an hour workout, but it was a hard one, and your body is still playing catch up and you're hungry from that, you need like I don't have like many rules, but like if I have a food rule, usually we're working to break food rules, but if I'm making a food rule, it is, if you were hungry, I want you to eat. I don't care what you just ate, and I don't care what's happening. Like,
it doesn't matter what time of day it is. If it's not lunch, don't worry about it. Your body has an amazing sense. Those hunger cues are there for a reason, and especially if it's trying to recover. So, and I feel like one thing that athletes relate to is getting fitter and faster. So everybody wants to get fitter and faster. And so I just tell them, if you're hungry the day after a hard training day, your body is telling you it needs fuel to recover. Otherwise, that training day, it might as well have never happened. So in that register, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to lose all my gains. And so you have to listen to your hunger cues.
Yeah. And then, but then, when you don't feel hungry, and I hear this all the time, and it could be immediately after, or just the rest of the day, like, oh, I just struggled to get food in after a long run or after a big workout or whatever it is. And that's where we take those strategies of okay, great. How can we get calories in a way that isn't going to make you feel like you want to vomit? And maybe we're going to smoothies, maybe we're relying on protein, kind of recovery shakes kind of things. Maybe we're eating smaller, more frequent meals. I mean, there are lots of strategies that we can kind of pursue to make sure that you're getting the different nutrients that you need to recover because you are in a deficit. And I mean, was it yesterday? I think just yesterday I worked with a client who, ran a long run and, training for an ultra and took in a ton of liquid nutrition, tailwind, did some food, did an amazing, he ate a good breakfast before. He was on top of his fueling game during, really good job. And then afterwards, he did get food in, but he was just kind of struggling because, it was kind of full from everything. But I mean, all to say, you just need to just do your best with all of this. And what he was like, oh, I felt pressure to eat a full heavy, or just a full solid meal right afterwards. And so instead he had, I think, a rebuild shake and oatmeal with some stuff in it, because that's all he could kind of stomach. And I'm like, well, that's fine. You just do your best getting it in, and you'll kind of catch up later. But even having taken in so many, this thousands of calories, he was still in a deficit in that run, because he was burning far more than he was taking in. So it definitely is a balancing act.
Yeah, there are days, especially for the ultra athletes, the ultra marathoners and even bike racers. And, you physically probably can't take in enough food on that day to cover what you've expended. But I always say, view it, let's look at it as a week of let's end the week not in a deficit, because there are days where you just can't eat enough to catch up. However, that next day, you can eat more, so let's try to even this out here.
Yeah, exactly. And it also, I mean, it depends on obviously what, are you leaning more on, liquid nutrition or what you're using? I mean, I'm definitely a food first person on all accounts, but, obviously products come in handy for certain things. And you lean on those when needed. yeah, so I mean, I think that like there's a lot of things we can do to kind of just explore all this stuff. I think I had a lot of other things to say and I totally forgot. I
Oh
lost my
my
train of thought.
God.
Maybe it'll come back to me later. But yeah, I would say kind of just paying attention to all this stuff. And yeah, trying to uh, just. Oh, I know what I was going to say. That with all this stuff, we always talk about fueling for performance and recovery and staying on top of all this stuff. But like, we're never striving to be perfect. As never ever the goal. We always have like ideals, right? And things we are striving for, but we recognize too that life happens and you're just going to do your best on any given day. And if one day is like total crap when it comes to food and you ate no vegetables, like whatever, like who cares? Like it's okay. As you said, we're looking across multiple days or week. We're looking at the bigger picture, and you don't need to feel badly if I don't know, you like, or even like if you're craving, you finish a big workout and you're craving like a cheeseburger and that's like what sounds good to you and that's how you get your recovery nutrition, and then great, fine. I mean, obviously there are lots of, we then look at again the whole person and what's going on there. How often you have the cheeseburger? Do you have like, any like history of cardiovascular issues? Like there are also things you look into, obviously. But when it comes to kind of health and well-being, we always also have to focus on not only what your nutrition needs are, but what you need and want to feel good, like physically, but also like mentally, emotionally, like what tastes good, what's satisfying, what like makes you happy.
Yeah.
If like you're gonna have like a milkshake and whatever other stuff, like fine. So like we're kind of balancing all these different things, or at least that's what I do with my clients. We always want to make sure, and with athletes, they can get very rigid and strict, and I must do this to reach this performance goal and to, lean out and do all this stuff. And I always like to think about sustainability and longevity in sport.
Same,
And that's a
same.
lot of what I do. And if I don't know if you listened to my last interview with Jessie Diggins, the Olympic skier,
Totally.
but she's amazing. And we get into this a lot about just like, how do you be a happy, healthy, balanced athlete?
Yeah.
And it's not being completely rigid and sticking to rules. And this is where it can get tricky, because like, as we said, like we're trying to encourage eating enough, and we do have these general sports nutrition guidelines in terms of macros and things, goals we have, and the timing, and the research supports this and that and whatever, which are, so much of it is number based, but then we're also trying to weigh it against so many things. So I can understand how people get really confused and how complicated it is, because it is complicated. And just to any listeners who are struggling with it, like I still sometimes even struggle myself as a dietitian. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Oh, me
hard to
too.
figure it out,
Yeah.
right? So, anywho, let's move on to this whole big topic of weight. And this is one, I swear, every dietitian I get on, I'm going to start talking about this because I want to hear how everyone's handling this right now. As I said off, before we started recording, like this is something that as I've kind of matured as a dietitian and gotten more experience, that I've started to struggle with more and more.
Yeah.
And I took weight loss and weight management off my website. I really struggle. I don't really always accept straight weight loss clients anymore, or want
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
necessarily. It's something that I actually kind of struggle with. I follow and really respect and admire and learn from a lot of intuitive eating, health at every size dietitians,
Yeah.
although I don't
Same.
100% align myself with those people, to be perfectly honest, because I don't necessarily see changing the body, whether it's intentional or not, as, I mean, I know they don't see it as a bad thing either. I know that, but I don't know. It's tricky with sport because there's no denying that weight and body composition on some level do influence performance, but it's
Mhm.
certainly, and as I talked about with Jessie Diggins in my last show, like it is just one of so many factors, and
Yeah.
it's not something that we want to dwell on and obsess about. And it's certainly like paying too much attention to these things can often do more harm than good, because as we both know,
Mhm.
disordered eating and eating disorders are so prevalent in the sporting community,
Yeah.
whether it's recreational or not. Um, and So yeah, so I think it's just one of these things that's really tricky. It's something I myself, in full disclosure to any of my clients who are listening, or potential clients, or people who are never going to be my clients, it's something I'm still trying to like iron out my own philosophy and approach. And now as I said to you, probably like 90% of people coming to me have some weight related goal. And every time I do a intro call, I'm so honest with them about like, I am not going to put this at the forefront of us working together. Not to say I will ignore it, but and I kind of like lay it out about my thoughts and feelings about it. But when we are working with cyclists, triathletes, runners, any kind of athlete who is doing something that is, they're carrying their body weight forward and through space. They're, maybe they're doing a more aesthetic type of sport like gymnastics or something, or ballet, or, they're just, again, there is no denying that if you were to weigh 50 pounds heavier, that would have a dramatic impact on things, right? And it's not to say that you can't participate in the sport at whatever weight you want, but you'll have a different experience and you'll have a different level of performance. So that's where it becomes really tricky, because as practitioners who want to help people perform at their best, especially as you start to work with higher level athletes, and I don't really have any right now on my current roster. I don't have any professional or elite athletes, although I have in the past. And it's just one of those tricky things. And you also want to encourage and really cultivate a healthy mindset when it comes to body and nutrition and all of that good stuff. And you want them to fuel well and not be scared of food. I mean, it's such a minefield, man. it's a lot, and I don't want anyone to get the sense that, I mean, I'm only human. I'm figuring out. I'm learning as I go. I am not going to pretend as if I have everything figured out there. I don't. But yeah, weight loss, leaning out, and training. This is a huge one. And what I'll say before I turn it over to you, I will say, like, it usually is advised. Like, if you read the Sports Nutrition, the Academy's paper, joint paper with what is it, the American College of Sports Medicine. They advise to only attempt to lose weight or get lean outside of the competitive season. So like and it's in a very particular way. And yes, you can kind of reduce your caloric intake overall somewhat if you always have to make sure you're fueling and recovering from workouts well. You have to increase your protein intake even more and really make sure you're getting enough carbohydrates so that we're not burning muscle, which is never a good thing, obviously. Muscle, right? So there are very kind of clear-cut guidelines to follow. And again, never during the competitive season, because that's when, hey, red S might, if you are chronically under fueling to lose weight, and you're always making food decisions rather than thinking, oh, I'm going to eat this to recover and to really enhance my performance, but I'm going to do this to lose weight. You're not going to perform well, and you're going to like mess your body up. So I'm kind of, I want to discuss how to kind of approach all this with clients. How can we avoid impacting performance negatively, even if we're working in the off season? Because like, let's say we get somebody who wants to lose a little weight, and we think professionally, it's our professional opinion that there is some weight to lose. Because obviously there are some people where I'm like, you're not losing weight. Like, that's not healthy for you. And there are other people where I'm like, sure, you can lose 5 to 10 pounds if it's done in a very healthy way and whatnot, right? But even if we're doing it in the off season or a time where nothing's planned and they have the time, we still need to make sure they're eating enough. So how do we balance all that? What are your thoughts on? I know I just dropped like 1,000 words, so I'm sorry. I'm like totally just speaking improv here on all my thoughts on this big subject.
It's a big topic. It's a big topic, and I'm seeing it a lot right now with having been in quarantine for a year with COVID. People are starting to want to lose the weight that they have gained. And a lot of athletes are not there aren't a ton of races on the calendar, so they're not in competitive season. When a client comes to me with a weight loss goal, I am very upfront of, yes, of course, we will aim towards that goal. I mean, of course, I never guarantee it. However, I always tell them my number one goal working with you is to make you feel better. So
that's exactly what I say, literally.
Yeah, like let's
literally for word.
Because sometimes like I'll start working with clients and I'll get a message that's like a week and a half later, like I haven't lost a pound, or and when I just say my first question is, how do you feel? And 95% of the time they're like, I feel amazing, my energy's great, and I said, great, you're fueling your body well for the day. And what I do is I really focus on, because most of them, granted, there's no races on the calendar, but they're still exercising and working out. So I say, we need to, because if you underperform, you're not going to be able to work out as long or as hard, and then that will be detrimental to your weight loss goals. So our number one goal is to get you performing the best that we can in order to reach that goal. So what we do is we really focus on fueling in pre, during, and post training. Like that, I never skimp on, even if it is the off season. And so we really focus on making sure that, we're not skimping on carbohydrates or calories pre, during, and post training. And then if they're feeling great in their workouts, they're feeling great throughout the day, then later in the day, we can say, okay, well, maybe afternoon snack is a little more protein focused with a little carbohydrate, and then dinner, let's just, let's focus on protein and really good. Let's aim for 3 cups of vegetables, and sweet potatoes, or, something like that. And usually, then they won't, my goal is for them to be full by dinner if they do have a weight loss goal, where they're not wanting to snack, they're not hungry, they're not feeling they need that bedtime sugar rush, because that's where they usually run into, the weight gain. And so, that's why, I just focus on how we're feeling, because who cares how much weight you're losing if you feel like crap all day, or you're not hitting your workouts. Like, it's not going to make you faster if you're losing weight, but your workouts are suffering. So, I usually have that talk with all my clients at the beginning.
Yeah. And I think, and it's tricky too, because like, obviously, if we're dealing with like really high level athletes, like a lot of the time performance is everything, right? But if with more recreational athletes, like losing weight, that's a multifaceted goal. Maybe it is to be faster on the bike and improve your power to weight ratio, but maybe it's also because of body image and confidence issues and wanting to look better because they believe that will make them look better, or whatever it may be. And that's like a whole different discussion, and we're not going to get into that today, but I just want to acknowledge that, I always understand, obviously where people are coming from. I have always been in a somewhat small body, so I don't know what it's like to be overweight or obese or fat or whatever. I know people are using all kinds of words for things now, and I think fat is now it's used in a different way, not in a negative way. But I don't have that experience, but I would be lying if I suddenly gained 30 pounds. I would be lying if I wouldn't be like pleased about it. And that's just me being perfectly honest. And I don't know, again, it's a tricky thing. I'm not saying that we have all the answers here. Again, we don't, but it is, I'm happy to hear that that we jive in this approach, and that that's what I say to my clients too. It's really about feeling good, and feeling good is an all-encompassing thing, just like we take a very holistic approach in working with people and looking at all areas of their life because it's all connected. Feeling good is not just like, having a good workout. It's everything, right? Because again, everything is strung together, and the sleep and the stress and food and how food makes you feel. And if you're, sweet potatoes and vegetables and a protein, that's all great. And it's obviously super healthy and it will meet your needs. But if you're like begrudgingly eating it and choking it down, and you're just feeling like crap and resentful and you hate everything, like we need to change things up and get some stuff in there. And if having a dessert after dinner makes you happy, then great. But if you're not hungry and you're not enjoying the stuff you're eating at night, which is also not healthy, okay, we need to take a second look at that. So yeah, it's a tricky one for sure. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of address that. And I'm, again, kind of happy to hear that I'm not the only one with that whole approach. I want to just quickly back up because it occurred to me something that I forgot to say. You mentioned kind of some people not eating before runs, and I know, like you can think of all those generic like sports nutrition, not even sports nutrition, but like those generic articles. You mentioned like Shape Magazine, all those magazines where it's like, what to eat, or What is Real Magazine, what to eat before a run, or like when to eat before a workout, and yes, it's true. I will say, like, there are certain types of workouts, like if it's just like a short recovery run or an easy workout or, a shorter workout or whatever, and you feel good and you have good energy and you're fine and it's early enough that you're not really postponing breakfast, like you don't necessarily need to eat before. But when we're talking about people, again, the topic here is red S. I know we're like changing into this, or I'm changing into this huge umbrella thing, but the topic being red S, like if your goal is to really, make sure you're meeting high energy needs. And again, when you are training hard, that increases your energy needs, energy meaning calories, but obviously from all different types of foods. It's an opportunity to fuel. So you remember that even if, and I remind like, especially like some of my male clients who have just like crazy energy needs, like they struggle sometimes to get enough in, and they're like struggling to get like the snacks or whatever. And I'm like, so don't like have these huge meals at night. Like let's spread it out throughout the day. I mean, there's so many reasons to do that anyways, for a number of reasons. But I mean, so if you get up and if you can tolerate a banana with some peanut butter or whatever it is, a piece of toast, etc., like anything really, carb-based is ideally, but you can tolerate eating something or train your stomach to eat something before you do your run, even though you may not feel you need it, because they'll be like, well, it was fine, but I didn't feel any better. I'm like, but you didn't feel worse and you got calories in. So that's a win in my opinion. So kind of thinking of different times in the day, like there'll be people who don't snack and maybe they're busy, or maybe they just don't feel the need, they don't like it, they don't want to. But again, it's like, well, but again, this is helping you meet your nutrition needs. And if you're struggling to meet through meals, or if you have a workout at a certain time and it's been 5 hours since you've eaten something, like obviously that's not good. So it's just, again, identifying eating opportunities. So don't think about, do I really need this? Or I feel, well, actually you do need it, but don't think about it as like I feel fine without it. Think about what it's going to do for you, and it's an opportunity to take on board nutrition that will help all of your other goals, right? And I always tell people, like, you cannot prioritize your exercise without prioritizing food. They go hand in hand, and you have to address both, because I'll get people who like, oh, I don't care about food, or it's annoying, or I don't know, or whatever the case may be, or they're rushing, they make time for their workout and then they rush to work and don't eat breakfast. I'm like, if you're going to wake up early enough to do your workout, you need to wake up 10 minutes earlier to make time for your breakfast.
10 minutes. That's all it takes.
You know what I mean? So anyways, okay. End rant. Okay. Let's talk about secondary amenorrhea, or the loss of your period, in terms of, due to overtraining, or again, not eating enough, or all this stuff. It is obviously a big deal among female athletes, and you yourself experienced it. And even though it's common, it is never normal, healthy, or okay to lose your period. And this is definitely like being talked about a lot more, thankfully, in recent years. And there are some Instagram accounts even like completely dedicated to this topic, and lots of people speaking out, which is great. But yeah, how do you work with athletes who have lost their periods to get it back? So I think you said that you are working with some people now, or you have in the past, on this.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about baby steps. And so, I just take small steps. I know our end goal. Based on how much they're working out and, their lifestyle, I have an idea of where we need to get them in order to get their period back. I mean, it's hard. Everyone's so different. I mean, there's the energy availability calculator where they say, if you're, you have to have 35 to 45 calories per kilogram of fat-free mass a day, in order to, regain menstruation. But everybody is different and it takes a different approach. And so, we just start out and kind of feel it out. And I always, get a sense of what my clients are comfortable with. And then, just baby steps. A lot of times, I mean, like I mentioned before, most of the time it's just eating before a run. And that's, and then the next week it's adding in an afternoon snack that has, a good amount of protein, a little bit of fat and some carbohydrates, especially if they're doing double sessions.
Yeah.
And, so that could be the next week. That could be our next goal. And then, then after that, let's focus. If they're not used to eating like a snack before bed, let's add that in. So it's not overwhelming. And just take an approach where, we're adding things in, adding things that they enjoy eating in to their diet, without overwhelming. Because the minute, I can say this from experience, the minute you overwhelm someone with this, they're just gonna put their guardrails back.
Shut down. Shut down.
Shut down.
Yeah.
So there's, it's a delicate balance of helping them, yet not overwhelming them.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I agree completely. Okay, great. And let's talk about the men. The men are not an afterthought, and that's not why I did it for a second. But I mean, men, and by the way, like in this discussion, like I know we've talked a bit about eating disorders and disordered eating. That is such a bigger topic, so we're not getting really in depth in this stuff. Obviously, the process of getting a period back when in the context of any disordered eating or eating disorder is a lot more complicated and tricky. It's not just like, hey, why don't you try eating this now? And the person's like, sure, great. Like it's really hard. So we're not getting into that so much today, just because again, that's another huge topic. But with men, and actually I'll back up and I'll just say, like, again, there's so much overlap. So you can't like completely unzip the two, in terms of disordered eating in particular, from a lot of this stuff, because all too often, or almost always, in fact, it's there on some level, But yeah, so getting back to the men, is there anything specific to men? Because we just talked about losing the period with women. Anything specific to men that we haven't already talked about that you'd like to discuss, that you've seen in your clients, or you think that my audience might be interested in?
Well, I mean, it's hard. I feel for men because they don't have that number one indicator there. I mean, for females, we lose our periods. And usually if we lose our period, that means that we are not fueling our bodies correctly. Obviously there's other clinical reasons. However, for athletes, that usually is the number one. And, I think, males, their testosterone levels will decrease, but it's the only way that they can, it's like they actually have to go into the doctor and get those tested. I guess if the one thing that I do tell, I ask males is like, how's your sex drive? Because that's usually a key indicator of their testosterone levels. And if they're training and they don't have a sex drive, that's usually a sign that they may be in, especially if they're, in their 30s, they shouldn't be training that hard where it kills the sex drive. There's something else underlying going on. Yeah. And so that's a big, I think that's the biggest way that males can probably tell. And then obviously performance. And, men are not immune to stress fractures just because they don't have estrogen, and so a lot of times, if they're getting bone injuries, that's also a sign that you're not fueling your body to recover from these workouts. And so if your training's going downhill despite an increase in training load, if you're having multiple injuries, or if you have a low sex drive, that's usually what I tell males to look out for.
Yeah, absolutely. No, for sure. And men are absolutely not immune to disordered eating disorders. It's actually extremely common. And again, like, more men are speaking up about it. And I've had some people on the show speak about it. So So yeah, that often can be linked to what's going on as well. So okay, awesome. Thanks for sharing. I think that's a really good tip about that.
Yeah.
One last thing. So we were talking about bone health and all that. Let's talk about coming back from injuries. Just because bone injuries are so often related to RED-S and underfueling, just with athletes not taking in enough nutrition or the right types of nutrients, such as protein, vitamin D, and calcium. So they are really at risk. So yeah, when you get someone who comes in with a stress fracture, or again, like kind of thinking about if someone is dealing with an injury, how can we work with them, or what advice can we give to people who are trying to really prioritize healing and getting back to the sport that they love? But, and obviously they still need to be eating enough to heal. But balancing that fear of weight gain that many experience because they're less active. So like, I know I've had clients who suddenly can't run anymore and they're just so stressed out about, the lack of, I mean, first of all, just like, it's hard being injured. It sucks not being active when you love being active, right? But then also you're kind of scared of the changes to your body and or the loss of muscle mass or the fear of weight gain or whatever is going on. I feel like the first urge is just to restrict among so many people because they're like, I can't, but really that's the last thing that you want to be doing for your recovery. So can you talk a little bit about kind of working in terms of healing, especially with relation to bone injuries?
Yeah. So I am working with a client who has a recent stress fracture. And so I kind of, I've taken a lot of seminars on this, but I wanted to go back and dig into the research. And I found an article, a recent, I think it was 2019, and I can look for the resource and give it to you. But it says that, if you're injured, it can increase your resting basal metabolic rate by 10 to almost 100%, depending on the injury. Like brain injuries are, closer to that higher level, but they do say that bone injuries is about 20 to 30%, which it's a lot. Your body is requiring a lot of energy to rebuild. It's remodeling that bone. And so that takes energy. And to get energy, we get our energy from food. And so I just say, if your calorie restriction while you're injured is significant, it's going to slow the recovery process. And I think the statistics that they had was almost by 20 to 30% if you're underfueling, which, no athlete wants to be sidelined for 20 to 30% longer, especially from these injuries. And so, your protein needs go up. I always tell them, we need to focus on protein, and just instead of focusing on calories, I just kind of try to focus on the micronutrients that are really critical at this time, and just kind of let them know that, your body needs this fuel to recover. Otherwise, we're setting it back. So do you want to be on your couch, 2 or 3 weeks longer just because, you're scared of gaining a little bit of weight? Because once you're able, if for some reason you do gain weight, it's fine. Once you start working out again, we know it's going to come off.
Exactly.
It's not going to be there forever. And in anything, your body needs these cycles. Maybe this athlete probably most likely has not been in an off season for a while where they've actually allowed their body to gain the weight that it wants to gain once in a while. And so this is a great time to let this naturally be your body's cycle of putting on a little bit of extra weight, because it will come off when you're able to start training hard again. We just, we need to make sure that we're getting through this injury as quickly as possible. And, and then we just focus on, the vitamin D, omega-3s, the whey protein, the vitamin C. Those are kind of my key go-tos when it comes to
why whey protein versus food protein? Just curious.
Well, I mean, you can get whey. I mean, you can get food from or protein from food. Whey is just high in leucine. And so, I mean, a lot of clients don't eat whey protein, which is fine. But even like a lot of the vegetarian protein powders also have quite a bit of leucine in it, just because leucine is kind of just the key amino acid for, muscle protein synthesis and recovery. So,
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. No, that's definitely a good way of looking at it in terms of, just letting your body just naturally cycle through this kind of weight change and not like catastrophizing it, but it's just, really weight can only go 3 ways: up, down, stay the same, and it will do all those things over the course of your life. That's just fact. That's fact, and you have to accept it. But in terms of, there are professional athletes out there who kind of intentionally take time off and let their body gain weight, and then they kind of get back into, more intense training. So, this is something that many people just let their bodies do to kind of, as part of like the kind of recovery process, both mentally and physically, so again, if you're interested in doing your sport or whatever sports that you love for your entire life, or as long as physically possible, because again, we want sustainability, longevity in sport. You have to recognize you can't just like go like hard all the time. Like it's not just like on the micro scale of taking a rest day a week. It's more than that. It's way more than that. You have to stay on top of whether or not you're burning yourself out mentally and physically. It's doing different things, just kind of like if you're a runner, like doing other fun activities, not just doing the running, or there's just like lots of ways to go about this. But I think it's just always really good to be thinking about, how can I stay strong for a long time, and healthy and strong, again, mentally as well. Mentally is such a key part of this. And that's why being too rigid with food or with training or anything, really, that is going to come back to bite you, So yeah, that's a really, really helpful answer. Thank you. Anything else you'd like to add to this discussion? We like really went all over the place with this one.
But tailoring to our last topic, I just want to say that I learned the hard way. And so my goal, and the reason I chose this career is I don't want other athletes or, anyone to be in the situation that I got myself into. I mean, I was sitting there when my doctor read over the DEXA scan results, and she told me I would never run again. I mean, she told me, and I loved a mountain bike. She said, do not get on your mountain bike. Do not ski. You won't run, and I just looked at her, and I of course took it in my own hands and was like, well, I'm going to fix this. However, it's a horrible feeling to lose that. It's, sport isn't everything. I have a wonderful family. I've got great friends, and, however, to lose something that you love doing, it's not worth it. So just making small changes before it's too late it's key. And plus it's fun to fuel your body. And that's my goal is with, and that's a big reason that I do these meal plans, is because I put some really awesome recipes in there that are fun.
Nice.
And that are like super nutrient dense, yet super tasty. None of it's bland. I'm not telling clients to eat like shredded chicken and rice and green beans. Like, these are like soups and stews and stir fries with all these great spices. And, because that's what's it, food. We're meant to enjoy it. Let's enjoy it,
Absolutely.
So, that was
absolutely. Awesome. And you said you work with someone else. Tell me a little bit about your business.
Yeah. So it's Nutritional Revolution. So you can go to our website, and there's 3 of us, Kyla and Becca and I. And we each have our own individual practices, but then we collaborate on projects. So one thing I was going to mention is we did do a seminar, a webinar on low energy availability in RED-S. And it's actually a really informative one, and it's available on our website for anyone that's interested in learning more. And we go in, we also do show like a sample meal plan of someone that may be recovering, and some fun, exciting new recipes, ways to eat, because I mean, I think that that's key, is just making, we're made to enjoy our food as humans. And so, if we can just get back to that, I think a lot of athletes, we lose focus on that, and we view it as just a fuel. And then that tends to get us in issue. That's what, I mean, to be honest, that's what got me into an issue, I think, is I just focused on like protein and lots of protein for fuel, which is totally wrong.
Yeah.
Instead of, I mean, there were times where my friends would go out to restaurants and I'd be like, I have a long run the next day. I don't know. And we only live once. If I could take that time back, I would go to those restaurants, but I can't. And so that's why I chose this career, is to, help others realize that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for the work that you do and for sharing
Well,
all of, some of your, not probably all, I'm sure there's a lot more expertise to be shared, but for sharing some of your expertise with us today. I'm going to wrap up with my quick bites questions, as I always do with my guests. So let's dive in. Favorite meal or snack when you're in a hurry?
Anything that has almond butter, I eat like a tub a week.
Yum. And favorite meal or snack when you're not in a hurry?
Oh, I love sushi.
Awesome. Favorite post-race meal or snack, or post-exercise?
Burritos.
Burritos?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say. I was like, did you say Doritos or burritos?
No.
Which are both delicious.
Pass on the Doritos. Sorry if people like them, but I know a burrito with as much avocado on there as possible.
Yum. And you are back to running now, or what are you up to on the sporting front, by the way? I forgot to ask.
Yeah, I am. I'm running just for fun, but it is ski season. So I do a lot of backcountry skiing on the weekends. And then skiing in the resort with my boys. They're 10 and 12, and they're little rippers now. So I mean, I take a very balanced approach. I love to mountain bike. I'm just active now. I'm not training
Awesome.
anything.
Yeah, definitely. Biggest cooking catastrophe?
Anytime I try to bake. I love to cook. I cook every night, but my 12-year-old does the baking in the house because I can't. I like melt the butter in the oven, or it's horrible.
I got it. Most bizarre or exotic food that you've ever tried?
Oh my gosh. When I was living in Australia, I ate I don't know what it was actually called, but it was a giant sea bug. So it had like a shell on there. I don't know. I can't even really remember what it tastes like, but I remember doing it. Yeah.
Got it. You blocked it out, I guess.
I think so.
If you eat eggs, how do you like your eggs cooked?
Poached, 100%.
Yum. What is your favorite beverage?
Well, I do live in Oregon, and I do love a good Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
Yum.
Nice. What foods remind you of growing up? What are your comfort foods?
Well, I grew up in Minnesota, so comfort foods are more anytime there's like potatoes. We ate so many potatoes. And just it is. I mean, people in the Midwest eat a lot of meat and potatoes.
They're delicious.
I know. It's a comfort food for sure.
What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
Oh gosh, this is a tough one. Probably chocolate chip cookie dough. I love the cookie dough chunks in there. It's just an excuse to eat cookie dough, really.
Yeah, totally. And last but not least, top 3 items of gear that are most essential to your active lifestyle.
Oh, well, I would say my skis, my running shoes, and my mountain bike.
Nice.
My prized
Good
item.
answer. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Kristin, for coming on the show. Really, really fun chatting with you all about these topics, and they're such important ones. And we went all directions with this, but I don't know. I felt like I kind of needed to cover all those things.
Yeah,
we could talk for hours. I mean, there's just so much you could say about this stuff, but hopefully, you guys benefited from listening, and I think we covered a lot of good stuff. Obviously, always feel free to follow up with me or with Kristin if you have any questions. And everyone can find you on your website. Are you on Instagram or Twitter or anywhere else?
I'm on Instagram. It's at KD Nutritionist. And I try to post as much as I can, but I'm so busy. It is one of the things that kind of falls to the wayside.
I hate social media, so I don't think I posted in like, maybe it's been a week. I don't know.
I know. I mean, I just would rather spend the time working with my clients. So if anyone wants to post for me, feel free.
Seriously, I might need to hire someone. Anywho, awesome. Well, thanks for coming on the show, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week.
Yeah, you as well. Cheers.
What are some takeaways that you guys had from the episode? I'd love to hear from you. If there's something that you were able to take away and apply to your own fueling to improve your training and overall health and well-being, please let me know. Love to hear from you. But I do, hope you found it helpful, that we got into some good topics for you. Of course, if there's anything that we didn't cover enough in depth, or you had any questions, just reach out to me and or Kristin, and I'm sure we would, be happy to help you out with that. And of course, if you're looking for some more professional help, I'm always here to help you there as well. You can go on my website, and I now finally added a little button where you can just click a free intro call now. So you don't have no back and forth of scheduling or anything like that. Just go ahead and book a call, and you can chat with me, and we can see if we're the right fit. Also, if you haven't already left a ratings or review on iTunes, I'm forever grateful if you do that. It really does help the show reach a wider audience, which is always my goal with this stuff. So yeah, head on over there and spend 5 seconds doing that. That would mean so much to me. All right, until the next episode, guys, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye now.